Hello, everyone. Hi, friends. How are you? Hi, everybody. Hello, friends. How's it going? Are you having a good night? Yes, you're here, right? Is everyone here? Are you here? If you're here, make some noise. Come on, are you here? Are you here? You are indeed here, and it is the 19th annual Facelift. Are you having a good time? You are, right? Yes. How are the brewskis flowing back there from Tioga Sequoia and Pure Project? Are you enjoying them? Are they delicious? Are they bubbly? Are they effervescent? Are you catching that great little buzz? Yeah. There's the high life happening right there for that gentleman. Okay, we got the numbers right now. My name is Timmy O'Neill, and I'm going to be your MC for the evening. And we have the total number of poundage here. Ken Yeager slipped this to me earlier, 5986. We have almost 6,000 pounds of debris that we have pulled out of the park, and we are sending it to the right place. Today, 3,016. Yesterday, 1,521. And then the Benson family. Is anybody here from the Benson family? They did this tremendous job where they pulled 1,625 pounds. And that is tremendous. That is epic. I don't know what it was. It was actually a crashed car with the people still in it, and they pulled them out of the river. That is not true. Okay. So thank you to our sponsors, our dear friends at the North Face, co-presenting along with the Yosemite Climbing Association. And Ken Yeager is right here, the reason for the season, the man with the wild vision. Make some noise for Ken Yeager right there. Yes. Thank you, Kenny. Kenny Yeager, the acorn that became the giant oak tree known as the 19th annual Yosemite Facelift. Has anybody here been to the Mariposa-based Yosemite Climbing Museum? Yes. It's a wonderful place to visit. 2 years ago, we opened that thing, and it's been tremendously successful. We have Kenhenge there, not to be missed. It is a replica of Half Dome, of El Cap, and a Yosemite Falls proudly flowing between. It sits 30. It's immense. It's unusual. It is like Ken Yeager's spirit, immense and unusual. Make more noise for Ken Yeager right now. Yes, we are on a long, strange trip with Plaid, and it is called Life on Planet Earth. So I took over as executive director on May 1st for this wild organization, and we're doing great things. And I'd like to bring up some very important people. Karine Tarpinian, come on up here, events and partnership manager. Hannah Fleetwood, get up here. Where's Hannah Fleetwood? Our museum manager. Is Misia Serafino in here? Misia Serafino, our operations manager. Trevor Humphreys, come on up here. Where's Misia? Is Misia here? Misia. Whoa, that was amazing. And Ken, get up here right now. Ken, get up here. Ken Yeager, get up here right now. Christine, get up here. Christine Mustafezza, come up here. Is Don Beeling in the audience? Don Beeling, if you're here, come up here right now. Jack Worcester, if you're here, come up here right now. Christine is our general counsel. She's pro bono, giving it up, helping us with the legal. This is Ken Yeager, you know him. Trevor Humphreys right here. Hannah Fleetwood. We got Misia Serafino and Karine Tarpinian. Make some noise for these people right now. Monkey call, monkey call. Ooh. Okay, get off the stage, workers. Yes. Wow. And they've been doing it. We've really been doing it. We're doing all these great things, and we're taking this organization to great heights. It's amazing. Okay, some more friends here I'd like to thank. Our friends at Cliff Bar. Patagonia's in the audience. I see Justin and all the friends out there. Also our friends at Royal Robbins, Tioga Sequoia. We mentioned them earlier, and Pure Project. Our friends at Touchstone Climbing. Mark Melvin was in the, Touchstone. Touch yourself right now for screaming for Touchstone. Touch self, touchstone. Touch self to stone. Anyway, like I wasn't saying, Mark Melvin, owner with Deborah, his wife, of this juggernaut known as Touchstone Climbing, he was here yesterday for an important discussion. We had Cam King, Jesse McGahee, Dave, who's running the wilderness program here, and we had a discussion on the permitting that's happening with big walling and the wilderness, and it was insightful. It was in-depth. And I'll tell you this right now. You can comment online until November 16th about how you feel about big walling and backcountry permitting coming together. And we're going to be receiving those online. If you need more information, get in touch with the YCA, and we'll bring you there. Expect announcements from us. But Mark Melvin, running Touchstone, he came up from the Bay Area because he cares about Yosemite. He has tens of thousands of members to his gym who come up here to Yosemite. Also, thank you to Arc'teryx, our friends from the Archaeopteryx. I went up to their Arc'teryx Academy in Squamish. If you get the chance, go. And our friends Toad & Co. and Koros Wearables. And we'll be mentioning more of these great sponsors in a second. But first, we'd like to bring a dear friend of Facelift up here. You guys know him as Luke Mihall, and he has written several books, 5 of them, in fact. Anybody here seen or read the Climbing Zine? Right, you know the Climbing Zine. This guy's amazing. He's a die-hard climbing fan, climbing publisher, climbing writer. He's been a hydro-ceramic technician for over 20 years of his life. That's a dishwasher. And he's done that simply to have the freedom to be able to touch self to stone as much as possible. What's also interesting about Luke is we're going to have Delaney Miller up here. And it turns out Luke was the first one to publish a piece from Lauren ever. So please welcome the first to publish Delaney Miller, Luke Mihall. Get up here. Keep it going. And he's going to be giving you some Luke Mihall stylings of the climbing poet.
It's the weirdest introduction ever. I love you, Timmy. The first time Timmy and I met, within like 30 minutes, he had me freestyling on a mic, and he was doing his beatboxing thing or whatever. Maybe we could do that later. It's insane to be standing up here. Yosemite to me means it's just a humbling place, and I first came here in 2001. And just before that, I had experienced like a mental health episode is the only way I could really describe it. I was super depressed and like suicidal and just in a terrible, terrible state. And I somehow got through that and climbing with like this light. And me and my best homie, 2-Tent Timmy, had planned to make a trip to Yosemite. And like right before that, a friend of ours passed away. And he died in a motorcycle accident. He was a climber. And I just like fell back into this depression. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't go to Yosemite. And 2-Tent Timmy was like, fuck that. Like, we're going to Yosemite. So we got in this little purple truck. I saw a purple truck here as like an omen. I don't know who, the purple truck with the 5-4 sticker. Is that person here tonight? No. But Timmy was like, let's do this. And Timmy was a fully formed, like 5'10 plus climber, like 6 months into it. And I'm not talking like the blue route at the gym. I'm talking like, what was the name of that route we did today, Taylor? Gold Dust. Yeah, he was climbing that within like 6 months of his climbing. And I was a solid like 5'7 plus leader. And so my first trip to Yosemite was just being so terrified and just getting dragged up everything by Timmy. But at the end of that trip, like Central Pilia Frenzy, I would still say that like 5'8 pitch has like been the hardest lead I'm the most proud of ever, But that first trip, everything seemed super, super hard. And I just followed around Timmy. And as we're leaving, I'm realizing I'm like, the love for adventure, for community, for climbing is greater than the fear of injury or death. And I've kind of been living that my whole life ever since. And the camaraderie of the climbing community has just grown with the Climbing Zine. And like, there's so much love, and it's just like expanding. So I'm about to read you guys a poem. I'm not going to read it. I have it memorized, hopefully, if it's still in my brain. I have to practice things like 100 times to actually recite them. But poetry is like this obscure thing. And right when I walked in here, the first 2 people I met were poets. And so that was a sign that I need to read this. It's called 22 Twos. I think there's still 22 twos in it. If you're smart and you can count along, let me know how many I have. Because it seems to me like it was just 2002. And me and 2-Tent Timmy were high and soloing 5'5". He was solid, I was terrified, that's the truth. It's 2022, and I'm just trying to stay in the mix like a Sean Carter in 1996. Only by a reasonable doubt am I free today, and I'm just trying to free y'all, even if it's just 2 of you. I'm just trying to get 22 number 2s and find a 1,000-foot hand crack and send that shit in one pitch. My laps on this life that is a climb aren't infinite. I know that like I know cracks. I'm born to climb and born to rhyme. I come from the era when Tommy Caldwell had one more finger. And we had 2 more towers in NYC. I'm not an MC, I'm just a student of the game. 2 hustles ago, I was in the back of the kitchen washing dishes with 99 problems, but a dish wasn't one. Now I'm Jack Kerouac on a hand crack. Or MF Doom on the crack of doom. And then I'm chilling like Mac Miller. Like Mac, we got too many problems these days, but it's too soon to give up. It's crazy. There's too many great humans, too many great organizations like the Yosemite Climbing Association. Too much love and too many hugs. Too many cool 2-year-olds to just give up on this shit. Come on, I come to the era of too legit to quit. I've done too many road trips with a tribe called Quest on tapes with 2 sides. To my people, it ain't too late to come together because too much us and too much love equals forever. That's 22 twos for 2022. Volume 22 of the Climbing Zine is here. Thank you. That was the best poem ever. That was so fun. Or the best experience. I really love that. And I just want to say to all the people who volunteer with this, don't think that your impact just is impactful in Yosemite. We're taking this stuff home. I take this stuff home to Durango. We recently started a local climbing organization, the Durango Climbers Coalition. Shout out to my homie Taylor Luneau over there. We started that together. And yeah, just want to thank everyone for your efforts and just know that your impact goes beyond Yosemite. So thank you.
Thank you, Luke. And hopefully Luke will be producing the Climbing Zine for the YCA's 20th anniversary next year. We're hoping to see that, Luke. Okay, a few more of our friends that I'd like to thank. Black Diamond, anybody win one of those cams today? We had a bunch of them. La Sportiva, thank you. The American Alpine Club, a dear partner of ours. Yosemite Hospitality, thanks very much for the Wawona dinners and all the rooms and everything. Iron Horse Vineyards, Clean Canteen, Parks Project. Anybody get one of our 2022 Facelift t-shirts? Thank you to Parks Project for those, big time. Our friends at Kodiak Cakes, Osprey Packs, Fit Socks, the Yosemite View Lodge, Yeti, and Balanced Rock. Tomorrow, Heather Sullivan, I believe, will be outside. That is correct, right, Karine? At 7:30 a.m., we'll be doing 30 minutes of yoga. Dress warm, Christine, you were saying. Need the puffy and the socks to get that downward-facing dog all the way down. Okay, so Lauren Delaney Miller, right? Wow. That's it. Wow. Okay, hold on. I just said her name, and that's the reaction she gets. That's amazing. My gosh, feels so good for you. Okay. Lauren, hold on. The person formerly known as the name I cannot say, was an employee here, employed for the search and rescue team. And that was 3 years, described as hard and great, and as the center of the universe. That's where she met her husband. Is that true? Okay, that is true. I figured I would just make that up. And then they met, but then they kind of fell away. That's not true. I made that part up. Things are going to get weird. I'll stop talking. Anyway, Bud. She met Bud. And the two shall never be parted again. And they have their little dog, Bodie, correct? And we love him, too. And they live down in Bishop. And this is the cool thing about Lauren, because not only is she doing all of this great stuff, like being on search and rescue, but she's also going to the UC Berkeley to get her master's in journalism, right? Doing the deep dive. And that is because she wrote this wonderful thing called Valley of Giants. And it's also a deep dive of almost 100 years of the women's perspective, of the women's adventure, and of the women's stories here in the Valley of Giants, Yosemite Valley. Please welcome Lauren Delaney Miller!
Whoa! Whoa, this is crazy. Thanks. This is insane. Yeah, like Luke was saying, it's totally insane to be here talking to all you guys. It's so fun. I can't really see your faces now because the lights are just in my eyes, but I know that you're out there. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about this thing that I made. But we got to go back to the beginning. This picture's ridiculous. I've been waiting for so long to have a reason to show this picture to people in public. But this is a picture of me on my first day ever climbing outside. This picture was taken at Pilot Mountain State Park in Central North Carolina. Has anyone here been to Pilot Mountain State Park? Yes, sick. Okay. Yeah, I started climbing there when I was in college, and I really, really wanted to go to Yosemite, but obviously I was really far away from having the skills or the wherewithal to come and climb here. But at that time, in this moment, I set a goal for myself to come here and climb El Cap within 5 years. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that happened, which seems totally insane also, and then how that led to this project that I made. So between that picture and me being here today, there's been a lot of epics, a lot of trials and tribulations. I don't know if anyone recognizes this. This is the top of the first Flatiron in Boulder. This picture was taken by my friend Stephen Tata in like a for real, in a totally non-posed moment of utter terror. It had been like, we're like 7 hours in, we're at the top, and this lightning storm is like descending upon us. Right, it looks like it's windy, but that's my hair standing up from lightning. Dude, it was terrifying. There was like, when you're on top of the first Flatiron and there's lightning like in downtown Denver and over Rocky, you're like, oh, we are in it. Dude, I'm not even belaying correctly. This picture's totally ridiculous. But anyway, the point of this picture is that like it took me a little while to get here. But then we did it. This is a picture of me on top of the nose for the first time. Yeah, dude, that's sick. Yeah, I climbed it a couple of years ago with my friend Sarah, and we had an amazing trip to Yosemite. It was maybe the third time that I'd actually come here. The only epic we really had, well, besides the fact that I wore this cotton t-shirt the whole time, which was super uncomfortable and sweaty, was that we actually got rappelled on by like some high school kids from Texas who were had failed at climbing the nose and decided to wrap it in 3 days. And they were passing us at the top of the changing corners, which is, of course, one of the only hanging belays on the nose. And as they were doing that simul wrapping with their haul bags attached to them, my friend Sarah's ponytail got sucked into this guy's gree-gree. It was ridiculous. And but we made our way out of that situation. We got all 4 of us and all of our shit onto the anchor. And the next day, we went all the way to the top. And yeah, this was a really incredible moment and the sum of a lot of work. But yeah, something that I really want to tell you guys about is how important climbing literature and reading about climbing was from that first picture to this last picture. And that's because I'm from North Carolina, as that first picture implies. And yeah, I didn't know that many climbers, and I didn't know that much about climbing history. And so I read everything that I could possibly find. And this is a picture of my copy of Steph Davis's book, High Infatuation, which I'm sure some of you have read. I read it over and over again when I was in college because it was so helpful to me to see someone that I felt like I could relate to, right? Steph's from the East Coast. She had moved out west to Estes Park like I did at some point also, and having that story in front of me of someone that I felt like I can emulate at least a little bit, obviously never quite like Steph, but was so important to my growing as a climber. Oh wait, okay, so the thing that I'm going to tell you now is that when I got to Yosemite for the first time, I was so excited to keep reading, right? And so I went to the bookstore here in the valley, and I got a copy of Steve Roper's Camp 4, and I was staying in Camp 4, and I was so excited to read the stories of this place. But one thing that I read in that book really stood out to me. This is coming up really big because this is a huge screen, but I'll read it to you also. It says, wives and girlfriends tried climbing, of course, but they usually did it because their men were doing it, not for any particular love of the sport. And but the point of this, the reason I'm going to have a couple quotes up here tonight for you guys to look at is that I really want to drive home how easy it is to overlook stories that are all around us. And this was the first time that I really got a glimpse of that. Because at the time, all I knew was that I was staying in Yosemite, and I was climbing with women, and having these great adventures with women. And so this was the first time that I really felt like there was a disconnect between what I'd been reading in climbing history and climbing literature and what I was actually seeing and living every day. Dude, this big. So I was lucky enough to continue to stay year after year in Yosemite, and was also lucky to have some amazing female climbing mentors. This is a picture of me and Josie McKee and Quinn Brett after the three of us made the first one-day all-female ascent of the Triple Direct. And I'll tell you that, though, to be honest, like I really had no business going up on El Cap with them. I had just completed the world's hardest possible Naiad by completing it in exactly 23 hours and 59 minutes. That's true. Like running for the tree to get in under 24 hours. Yeah. And so I really had no business, right, going up for a quick ascent of El Cap with these ladies, but they made a point to mentor me. And that like camaraderie and that relationship that I had with other female climbers has always been something that is super, super important to me. This is really another picture of me somewhere I really didn't have any business being, but that's on the Valley SAR team. And I spent 3 seasons, like Timmy mentioned, on the SAR team here in the Valley. This is Jenna Wood and Alexa Flower, who are the women that I worked with my first year on the team. And yeah, once again, right, like going back to this Steve Roper quote, but like always having this idea that what I was living was so different than what I'd read about in climbing history. Of course, I'd read books like Seth Davis's and Lynn Hill's, but there were other stories that I felt like just didn't match up with what I was living. I was surrounded by badass women, and the more time I spent in the valley, the luckier I was in that I got to keep hearing all these little stories, right? You'd be out at the crag or at the campfire, and someone would tell you a story, and you're like, why is it that I've never heard this before? And at some point, it just occurred to me that the reason I'd never heard those before is because many of those stories have never been written down, and maybe they've been told to friends and family, but they've never been preserved in a way for future generations, and I really wanted to be someone that could do that. So I decided to write a book. This is like my most used gift for like the 3 years that I worked on this book. Every time someone would ask me how it was going, because I had truly no idea what I was getting myself into. I've done a lot of writing since, and I don't want to make it seem like I was some, super experienced writer when I pitched this book. I'd pretty much written for the climbing zine and then said, well, I'm a writer, because Luke told me I was, and so I guess I could do this too. Yeah, it's Luke's fault. All this is Luke's fault, yeah. So Mountaineers Books accepted my pitch for reasons I still to this day don't understand, but pretty quickly we were off to the races, and I had a year to put a book together documenting the history of women's climbing in Yosemite. But it's harder than you think to even decide where to start, because the Sierra, the Valley, has such a huge, long history of what we today might call peak bagging or scrambling. So even deciding where to start a book about climbing history is harder than you might think. But I kind of chose what I thought was a cop-out by deciding to start with the use of ropes. I usually use ropes when I go climbing, so that seemed like a good idea. But ropes climbing was a little bit different at the time. Rope climbing came to the Valley in the mid-30s. This picture was actually taken then 20 years in to that history in the early 50s. This is a picture of Ann Carpenter, and I just love everything about this photo. Like, rope is ridiculous. Entire denim outfit, ridiculous. Like, sneakers, ridiculous. This picture is taken on Higher Cathedral Spire in the early 50s, and I just think it's really cool. It's like amazing. So So I was doing a lot of like searching through the history books and picking out all these names, but I knew that I needed more. I needed more stories. And so I called up Ken Yeager over here, who was just getting the museum ready at the time. And he basically said, I've got tons of magazines that you can go through. And I was super excited, and I went down to Mariposa, and Ken basically dropped me off in a shed with like 50 boxes of magazines that were organized every which way, and but I spent all day in there going through magazines, and I found this gem. This is a climbing magazine from 2003. That's a picture of Lisa Bedient, who some of you probably know. Oh yeah. And what surprised me about this picture is that Lisa B is my neighbor in Bishop now. And I was like, what is this photo? I've never seen this before. And then since then, I brought it up to her, and she said, oh yeah, this was taken on Goldfinger in Tuolumne. And that was the end of the story. But then her husband, Josh Huckabee, told me, now in this picture, Lisa's making the first female ascent of Goldfinger, which she didn't know at the time until she got home later that day and had a message on her answering machine, like a physical answering machine, from John Backer congratulating her on making the first female ascent of Goldfinger. And I love this story because I just want to go back right to that original idea that like these stories are hidden all around us. Like Lisa's my neighbor. I see her almost every day, and I still hadn't even heard this story. And so it shouldn't really surprise us, right, that there's all of these amazing stories kind of hidden in plain sight. So I'm going through magazines. I'm looking on Super Topo. Oh, I spent so much time reading Super Topo forums for this book, which actually wasn't that useful because that summer they shut down the forum, so I couldn't get in touch with anyone or see any photos. But I'm making this huge list, right, of women that I want to talk to. But at some point, I realized I actually need to take the step and talk to them. And I conned some of my friends into writing for the book already, but I started to need to talk to people that I didn't know. And the first person that I reached out to was Babsy. This is Babsy Zangerl on a free ascent of the Zodiac. And I knew that she was someone that I wanted to have in my book. And so just like a total weirdo, I reached out to her on Instagram and was like, hey, Babsy, I'm writing a book, and maybe you'd be interested in being a part of it. And I totally thought I was never going to hear from her. But like within a couple of days, she got back to me and said she was staying in her camper somewhere in the valley, and that I should come by for coffee and to talk about the project. And like a total fangirl, I went and talked to her, and she was super excited about the book and committed to writing a story for the collection. And this was a huge turning point for me because it was the first time that someone that I didn't know told me that I had had a good idea. And Babsy's commitment really made me feel like the confidence to go out to all these other women that I'd never met before and tell them that I was putting this book together. But obviously, I wasn't going to be able to reach out to everyone that I wanted to talk to on Instagram because if I wanted to go all the way back to the 30s, Instagram wasn't going to be my best tool. And so this is a photo that I found in the special collections at Stanford because the Stanford Alpine Club was incredibly influential in the first couple decades of Yosemite climbing. And I saw this picture in a Stanford Historical Society magazine, and the caption just said, B. Vogel forges pitons outside the Stanford Engineering Lab. And then it said it was 1952. And something that really stuck, I mean, this picture is so cool. I love B's smirk, right? And this idea that, like, she seems kind of annoyed that someone's bothering to take her picture, like she's got much better things to do. And I really like that. But what really stood out to me is that she's forging pitons. And it's the early 1950s. And this is a part of Yosemite climbing history that I definitely had never heard of before. I've really never heard of that many women forging iron at all. And so to find out that they were forging their own pins as early as the 1950s had a huge impact on me. But I couldn't just take this photo and put it in my book. You know, there's all sorts of rules about permissions and things like that. So I Googled B's name hoping to talk to her, but I found out that she had actually just passed away in her 90s a couple months prior to me finding out about her. And so I thought that that was going to be the end of the journey, but obviously I ended up on a wild goose chase trying to track her down. And I pretty much spent the better part of a year using social media, using the internet, all sorts of like modern techniques to try to find or track down members of her family or anything that would get me closer to someone that could give me permission to use this and to give me more insight into who she was. And almost a year went by, my book was coming due, I knew that that I was going to be able to use this photo. And then somewhere in like the 11th page of Google search results, I found a digitized copy of the white pages for a town that it said her obituary had mentioned that her family might live in. And I found someone with a name that seemed related to her, and I sent them a letter in the mail to this physical address that was in the white pages. And really, I did this because I just wanted to know that I'd tried everything that I could. I didn't expect anyone to actually get back to me. But 2 weeks later, I got an email saying that this person had received my letter and that they were really excited to talk to me about Bea, who was their mom. And yeah, this story is incredibly important to me. Yeah, and it was just, yeah, who writes letters? Like, it was so random. Okay, this is I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories now. Oh yeah, you got to soak in this photo a little bit. Okay, so I'm compiling all these stories, and I'm talking to all these people, and at first I've got 5 stories, and I feel like, wow, that's pretty good. Like, maybe that's almost a book. And then eventually I've got 10 stories and 15 stories, and these are collections of things that people have written for me, or things that people have written before that we've gotten permission to reprint, or some of them come from the Stanford and Sierra Club archives, and they were transcribed oral histories. We've got all sorts of different things. And eventually I end up with 38 stories. That's how many we printed in the book. But I also knew that photos were going to be incredibly important to this book. And I first saw this photo when my friend Jane Jackson, also a former Yosar fame, posted it on Instagram and said, check out this cool picture of my mom, because that's Jane's mom on the left in all blue. And of course, I called Jane right away and said, I need that photo for my book. But of course, it was not that simple. And what she basically told me was, the photo that my mom has is like in a photo album. It's been super crinkled. It's small and discolored. And I don't think it's going to reprint very well. And then I realized I actually have 2 problems, because even if that photo was going to be good enough to reprint, in this world, I need the permission of the photographer, not just of the subjects. And so I asked who the photographer was. And the photographer of this photo is Charlie Fowler, who you might know is no longer around. So now I've got 2 cruxes. One is I need to find a better version of this photo. And 2, I somehow need to get permission from Charlie Fowler's family to use the photo. And I really don't know where to start. So I talked to Jane's mom, and she says, you know, this was in Rock and Ice. And she's like, maybe you could talk to the people at Rock and Ice, and maybe they have a copy of it. And so I start down on another rabbit hole. Surprisingly, getting in touch with Charlie Fowler's family was not as hard as I thought it was going to be, because someone else at Mountaineers Book had just written a book about Charlie and Christine. And so I was able to get in touch with his family, who basically said, you can use the photo if you can find it, but we don't have it, and so good luck. And so all I know now is that this photo was in Rock and Ice at some point. And so I'm thinking, who would remember this? And so at the time I was doing some writing for the American Alpine Journal, and I reached out to the editor, Duggold, and said, what would you do? And he said, George Braxiak was the editor of Rock and Ice at the time. Here's his email address. Maybe he would know. And so I reach out to George, and I'm like, hi, I'm Lauren, and I'm writing this book, and I'm trying to find this photo. Do you remember it? And he went, I definitely remember it, because Charlie had printed a bunch of photos in that magazine with very, kind of inappropriate captions that had upset some people. Like, he was trying to be funny, but they didn't really come across as funny to everyone. But it made a whole thing. And so basically, the point of this is that he was like, I definitely remember this photo. And then the most important thing was that he said, and because it was so important, I saved a copy of it, brand new. And he said, I'll send it to you if you PayPal me $15. And so, and I'm telling this quickly, right? But, this happened in, the course of, 8 months or something. So, of course, now I'm not going to stop for $15. So I PayPal George $15. And then the magazine comes in the mail. This was the cover, Rock and Ice number 13. And, I'm so excited to open it up. And I do. And there, right? It's awesome. So there's the picture of Jane's mom and friends on the left. And then there's also what I find are these other great photos, including this one on the bottom right. That's Shelley Preston Dunbar, former owner of Neptune Mountaineering on North Dome. And so now, right, I'm so close because I've got the magazine. Except that I'm not a photo person at all. So I'm like, how do I get the photos from the magazine into my book? And the only thing I can think to do is to bring this magazine down to the Bishop Art Supply and be like, could you scan this and make it seem okay? And they were like, yeah, we could try. And so they just scanned it. and sent me the files. And so this picture, what you're seeing, is actually like a scan from the magazine that George sent me. And yeah, I'm really proud of the, and I just love this picture. Okay, I've got another photo story for you because the photos were some of the funnest parts of working on this book. As I was putting some of the stories together, I got in touch with Molly Higgins, who with Barb Eastman did the first all-female ascent of the Nose, which was the second all-female ascent of El Cap. And of course, we're talking about her story. She'd written this great story about the Nose when it happened. And at some point in our conversations, she said to me, you know, by the way, I've got this like box of slides in my garage. They're probably junk, but like, do you want them? And like, when you're someone like me, you're just like, yes, of course I want them, without really thinking about what that meant. And so Molly boxed up all of her slides. They were all nicely organized from all these different climbs she had done in the late 70s, and she sent them to me here at my P.O. box. And I run down to the post office, and I get the box, and I bring it to the SAR cache and open it up. And then I realize it's just like full of bags of 35 millimeter slides. And I'm like holding them up to the sky, being like, how am I gonna like know if any of these are good or not? Because it costs like $5 a slide to get 35 millimeter slides scanned at this point. I'm like, well, I can't, and, you know, and there's 80. She's got 80 slides in here. So I'm like, how do I take these and figure out which are the best ones when I'm like looking at them like this in the sun? And like I'm sitting at the SAR cache, and I'm just like, how am I gonna figure out what to do with these? And then it hits me that John Dill is super old, and he's in the SAR cache, and he probably knows what we could do with these. And so I, yeah, John Dill saves the day. So I bust into John Dill's office, and he's snoozing with his feet up on his desk, and I'm like, John! I'm like, I got this cool stuff I need your help with. And he's like, looking in the box, and looking at him, and is like, come with me. And I follow him into the attic of the SAR cache, and we pull out a light box and like this little magnifying thing that we can use to look at the slides and all of this stuff that like, of course John has this. But I also should note that like the SAR cache is a relatively new building, which means that John like moved this from an old building into the new building a couple of years ago. Like it's not like it just happened to be there over time. Like John's the type of person that goes like, we should hold on to this. And so I'm super glad he did, because we laid out a bunch of Molly's slides. This is just a fraction of them. This is my proof, John Dill, Yosar. The label on everything, in case you thought maybe he didn't label something. And we lay out all the slides, and we're looking through this magnifying glass, and we have this realization that every single one of these photos is amazing and in like perfect condition and totally clear. Because I'd gone back to Dugald at the Alpine Club at some point and had asked him, like, isn't this so exciting? Like, what am I gonna do with all these slides? And he was like, you need to slow down, because back in the time of slides, like a lot of the photos would come out poorly. So she says 80 slides, and only 2 of them were ever digitized. It's possible that it's because they're the only 2 good ones. But now I'm like looking at 80 good slides. But I have another dilemma, right? Because just because they're good doesn't mean that I have the money to scan them all. And so luckily for me, I go back to Dugald, and I'm like, aha, you were wrong. They're all great, and we should scan them all. And then he was able to help me work with the American Alpine Club Library, who I then forwarded the slides to, and they scanned all of them and digitized them for their library, because, you know, I was only going to be able to pick 2 for the book, but now all of them live in an exhibit online in the American Alpine Club Library. Thanks. Yeah, there's some really amazing ones, not just from the Nose, from an early ascent of the east face of Washington Column, and which is Astroman before it was Astroman, and all sorts, the Arrowhead, Arete, and all the sorts of like really cool climbs. And I recommend that you check them out. So at this point in my story of working on this book, it's been like 3 years. And I'm like, okay, I turn in my book. I'm like, here's all the words, here's all the pictures. But of course my publisher says, well, we're not done yet, because we need a title and we need a cover. And this is when I realized that like this is maybe the hardest part of the whole book. Because like, how am I possibly gonna think of one image that could somehow sum up like almost 100 years of climbing history and all these different experiences? You know, some of the stories are happy, some of the stories are sad, some of them are all, you know, they've got all sorts of different types of stuff in them. And the first thing that came to me was the cover image. And that I just totally scored on because my friend Rhiannon had painted this, and I felt like it somehow perfectly captured the valley's brilliance and its femininity in a way that like felt inclusive at the same time. And so Rhiannon let us use this painting of hers on the cover. But then we had to think of a title. And like this was so hard for me, you guys. I even had like Timmy O'Neill on the phone trying to think of like you're creative, like help me think of some like cool, catchy things that can be the cover, like the title of this book. And it was so hard. And as I'm going through titles and thinking about the importance of titles, I'm reminded of another story that's not part of it is in this book, but part of it isn't, and I'll tell it to you. And so something I found out when I was working on this book is that when Sybil Hechtel and Bev Johnson made the first all-female ascent of El Cap, Sybil had written a article about it for the American Alpine Journal. And when she submitted it, she had titled it Walls Without Balls, which is super funny. Yes, but you maybe have never heard this before because the AAJ said, no, we're not going to do that. But they countered, and they said, well, what if we called it Keeping Abreast on El Cap? And Sabella and Bev were like, no, like, that's super lame. And so because they couldn't come up with a title, it went published in the 1974 American Alpine Journal as just Untitled, 1974. And it made me so bummed to know that this little bit of history, right, that story's been told elsewhere and the story's been republished. But that little bit of history was like missed there, right, just because of the title. And so, of course, like now I'm thinking, maybe I could pull that off because I can't think of a good title, and maybe we could just call it Untitled 2022. But Mountaineer's book says, no, we can't just call it Untitled. And so as a last-ditch effort, I'm like just going back through the book, like trying to remember things, because like there were stories that now I haven't read for a little while, and I'm just going back through it and trying to get ideas. And I come across a story by my friend Libby Souter, also of Yosemite Valley fame. Oh yeah. And Libby had written this amazing story that was all about community and the big, amazing people that come to the valley. And her story was called Valley of Giants. And I just was like, that is a pretty good name. And so I called Libby up and asked her for permission to use it as the title of the book. And she said yes, as long as she didn't have to come up with a new title for her story. So you'll notice if you look in the book that her story is also the namesake for this book. So then I'm like, all right, we did it. We got a title, we got a pretty picture, and we're done. And then they say, oh, you need a subtitle. I'm like, you guys, subtitles are so hard. And they're like, okay, the subtitle needs to actually, but I realize they're pretty important. Like, I don't know how much you've thought about subtitles before, but they actually are the part that tells you what the book is about. And so people think they're really important because Valley of Giants is like short and cool, but it doesn't actually tell you that much. And so you'd think, all right, well, we'll just tell people what the book is about. Easy enough. But of course, it's not that easy. And I suggest that the subtitle be Stories from Women at the Heart of Yosemite Climbing. And Mountaineers books, they're amazing people, but they felt like it was just maybe a little too long. Not that they didn't like it, they just felt like, oh, I don't know, it's like a lot of words. And so they were like, we decided we're going to go with Stories from Women Climbing in Yosemite. And like, I know that those are almost all the same words, but they don't mean the same thing. And so I'm thinking, I'm just like, I hate that subtitle. And so I'm just thinking, how am I gonna convince them that somehow the subtitle needs to be different than what they want it to be? And I'm realizing, oh, it's an idea of community and what it means to be a climber. Like, I'm trying to think of this argument to tell to my publisher, explaining the difference, between climbing and being a climber. And I think that that's something that probably a lot of y'all relate to. I especially do. As someone that doesn't really have time to even go climbing much anymore, I still very much feel like a climber because it's part of who I am. And so something about that subtitle didn't stick right with me. And I'm thinking about okay, how am I gonna show Mountaineers books this? And like I said, I'm going back through the book and refamiliarizing myself with all these little details. And I come across, I go back to Lynn Hill's story. And as you might imagine, it was pretty hard to choose which one story of Lynn Hill's I was going to include in this book. And while it might be obvious to include the story of climbing the nose, that's not the one that we ended up including. And the story that we ended up including is a story about Lynn and Mari Gingery making the first female ascent of the Shield. And I love this story because I feel like it's part of climbing history that often gets overlooked, which is like how well-rounded climbers of her generation really needed to be. And anyway, I just loved it. But as I'm going back through the story, there's another quote. And I'm like, this is exactly what I need. So Lynn quotes this in her story, but I'll read it to you too. It says, "Women are conspicuously absent from the climbs in this book. I have no apology to make here because it is not my place to change history." And so this quote is from the second edition of Galen Rowell's The Vertical World of Yosemite. And I asked Lynn about it. And to be fair, I didn't independently fact check this, but like when Lynn Hill tells you something, you're just like, okay. And so that's my asterisk there. But what Lynn told me is that when the first edition of The Vertical World of Yosemite came out, Galen had gotten some flack from people about having not very many women included in his book. So when the next version of the book came out, he felt the need to address that criticism. And then this is in that introduction that he wrote, and it goes on to talk about how like first ascents are the most important part of climbing history, and like basically it's not his fault if women weren't doing them, but like his job is just to preserve history. And I'm not saying this to like talk smack about him, because I want to go back to this original idea, right, which is that like these stories are hidden all around us. They're in this room right now. The people sitting next to you have done incredible things that have probably never told you about them before. And the point of that is that as like I feel that as history keepers and preservers, it's our responsibility to go out there and make an effort to seek them out. And so I wrote a little bit about this in the preface to the book here. And in the book, it's not like explicitly, to Galen Rowell, but in my head, it kind of is. And so I'm just going to read you this last paragraph here. The stories in this book span the full range of human emotion, from heartbreaking losses to soaring joys and everything in between. If you've been to Yosemite and have been lucky enough to swim, even momentarily, in its seas of granite, you may recognize the names and places described in these pages. If you haven't yet set foot in the sliver of the mighty Sierra Nevada, may these stories inspire and tantalize you. Most of all, may they demonstrate that women have always been at the center of Yosemite climbing. Women have been scaling these walls since modern climbing began, crafting their own equipment, establishing new routes, and dancing with grace in the harshest of earthly environments. This book is not a recreation of history, but merely a reflection. Our foremothers have much to teach us if only we stop and listen. So, thank you. Thank you.
Ask you some questions.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna cry.
Wow. Another standing ovation. Amazing. Okay, sit down. Sit down. Okay. Wow. Thank you. And is this the final stop on the tour? Or do you have more coming? Or
This was going to be the final stop, but I was invited to speak at the Banff Film Festival.
Okay,
because,
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're expecting great things, like an award there for sure.
Yeah.
Come on. So I have a question for you about history and her story, right? And kind of flipping that, right? There's been a prevalence of like Hidden Figures, the film about the African-American computational mathematicians and NASA. Of course, Rosalind Franklin, largely snubbed in the discovery of the double helix of DNA. And I'm curious if writing this book, you're also seeing that, as your last paragraph alludes to, as an ongoing corrective to that.
Yeah, I feel like it's a corrective in that, like, I feel that some women have felt encouraged to write their stories down. Like, these are not all untold stories. They just haven't been necessarily written down. And some of them have, like the story in here from Steph Davis comes from her book. Beth Rodden's writing a book. Like, Lynn Hill's obviously written a book. And so, like, some of these have been written down, but I feel like it's less of a correction and maybe more of like an encouragement of everyone to take the time to write their own stories down, because I feel like there's just been an imbalance in like who has felt empowered to like tell their story in this way before.
And are you familiar with the book The Power by Naomi Alderman or Circe by Madeline Miller. They're like these really proud female perspective stories where like the patriarchy is put down and the matriarchy takes over. Is that a dream?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's right, ladies.
Yeah.
And it's a dream of mine as well. Because, I'm going to have a kid soon, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Sarah, she's over 6 months pregnant. Yeah. And she's psyched because I'm going to be a stay away from home dad. But maybe if we flip the script, I'm going to be a stay at home dad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
So I'm curious if like the deep sleuth work that you've done on this book, like you were going like genealogically, like has anybody been after you like, can you find my missing family member? Or like, has anybody come after you for like, hey, I'm looking for something that's lost, like praying for St. Anthony? Is that something that you're taking on the mantle of?
No, I should think about. People keep asking me to do this book for other places, which I'm definitely not going to do. But genealogy seems like somewhere I could maybe move into.
Have you considered if like the journalism doesn't work out, which I know it's going to, like maybe a career as a bounty hunter?
Oh, we're in. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
I think it'd be fascinating. Lauren, like you could work with Dog the Bounty Hunter. Yeah. Lauren the Bounty Hunter.
I know, that's
It's going to be so sweet.
Yeah.
So with the writing of this book, and you did this super deep dive, and you hear of people having such difficulty, like writer's block, and how hard it is to actually do the craft, and you have to lay the bricks every day. What was your biggest takeaway from such a deep dive and bringing it to fruition?
Yeah, I think something that was really interesting about this is that I approached a lot of people who their immediate reaction was like, oh, I'm not a writer. But once you got them talking, they could tell a great story. And I feel like I really related to that because, like, not surprisingly, I'm kind of a talker and not...
No, Lauren, come on.
Yeah, and so I would encourage a lot of them to just tell me stories, and we would just record them and then transcribe that and use that as the first draft. And that's something that I do in my own writing a lot. And so I felt like, I really wanted to encourage people to see storytelling in like a variety of forms, and that just because the form that like this was published as written, but like most of these stories started as oral, as oral histories, as someone telling it to someone else. And so I just wanted to like, I guess make people feel like they are storytellers, even if writing is not necessarily the medium that comes to them first.
And it's interesting, storytellers, how about story listening? Like that's something that we all love. Like that's why we're here, to listen to you tell this story. Did you find yourself becoming a better listener then through the process? Like you like to talk, you like to ask questions, but the listening part was also matured for you or
Oh yeah,
developed?
For sure. Yeah, I feel like you'd hear little gems, like even with Bee Vogel, like someone, talking to her son. We talked about climbing, for hours. And then at the end of our conversation, he said, oh, my mom also was like a really big, feminist activist in the early 70s. And he was like, okay, talk to you later. And like getting, and I felt like training my brain to like listen for little gems like that, like led me down all sorts of like different rabbit holes. Yeah, it was really special to like get to spend that much time listening.
And then as far as like stories that you didn't get, like if you could pick a story that you wanted so badly to, like, they have that great thing where who are the 3 writers you would invite to, dinner or something like that. What is a writer that you would have really loved to have gotten their story firsthand?
Oh, Bev Johnson. Yeah. Bev was someone that she's mentioned in many, many of the stories because of like how influential she was to those people that were writing stories. But there's a lot of climbers that just aren't around anymore.
And if you could speak for Bev, like what was it you were trying to plumb in finding her stories? Like that influence, obviously, but was there something in particular that you wanted to learn or hear from her?
I guess I would have loved to hear from her about doing first ascents, because I feel like it's really special, and there's been so much emphasis in climbing history on doing first ascents, and a lot of hers have been overlooked because she often was like with male partners, and I think that's what I would want to ask her more about. And
is writing a book, is it gnarlier than like a wicked first ascent? Like Marek Raganovich was on stage last night, like 35 days, deep cold, starvation, alone. How does that compare to writing this book?
I would say that like that seems more like acutely painful, but like I have like long-term pain from sitting at a desk so much now that I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'd rather go climbing. Yeah.
Like long-term physical pain, but I mean, I would love to write a book, and I'm sure many of us in this room would like to do that. So last question, what does it feel like to bring this to life?
Uh-oh.
Like to have brought this to fruition? And what kind of power, what kind of feeling do you get from it?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's such a long-term process. Like I pitched this book in the summer of 2019, and so to be here now talking about it, it's like just taken up like a huge chunk of my life. And so to see something that's like that exists physically like this and not just on the internet too is amazing. And then to get to come after like all this time and talk to you guys about it is pretty, yeah.
Okay,
awesome.
last question. How stoked is Bud that you're done with this process? Yeah, he finally gets his lady back. Give it up for Bud Miller, actually, too, right there. Yes. Yes. Celebrating his lady. And once again, Lauren Delaney Miller, please welcome her. Yes. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, we're going to bring this surfboard up on here. Get a little hand, Josh. Let's see if we can hand this up to me. All right, give him a hand then, bro. Thanks so much. Yeah. Okay, this surfboard is one of a kind. We're going to take a quick break, but think about this surfboard because we're going to do a live auction on stage. We're going to be live auctioning this item off. And Josh, if you could jump up and bring it right over here to the center, that'd be amazing. This is the One Year Surf Company. Tyler Fromey, the son of Jeff Fromey in the back, who's been a long-serving volunteer of the YCA. This is a Redwood Surfboard. Right over here, Josh, a little further. Right here into the light, yeah, right here. Give it up for Josh Kent right now. Wow, thank you, Josh. We love you, Josh. You're amazing. Okay, this is a Redwood surfboard with maple stringers, abalone inlay. It's 6'4", 19 3/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch. It's a collector's item, one of a kind. It is also wall art, but meant to be surfed on the wave of life. Quick, get yourself a beer. Thank you to Taiga Sequoia and Pure Project. Get yourself a bathroom break. Thank you for Mother Nature. And we'll be back here in a few more minutes with Conrad Anchor. Yes!
Check, 1, 2, 3, check, 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 check.
Okay. All right, friends. Come and have a seat. Come and grab your seat, please. Make yourselves at home in your seat. Come on back. You could do it. That's it, monkey callers. Yes. Thank you to Pure Project for the Rove. I toast all of your healths to your peace, to your joy, to your well-being, to your future many years and many climbs, to many more facelifts together, to many hugs, to much love. Cheers. Okay. We're going to try that special thing we do where those of you that are paying attention, you do that S and H again that we did so well last night. The S and the H coming together. Get ready. On 3, 1, 2, 3. That does mean you. And thank you for shushing. Come and take these seats. We have all of these seats open, and we need you to come and sit back down, people. Come on in here. Those outside, tell them to come back in here. Hey, and we are selling Lauren Delaney Miller's book outside. She's signing it. We do have credit card capacity for that book. But come on in. So, as I mentioned, we're going to do a live auction before we bring up our dear friend of the YCA and of climbing and of the planet, Conrad Anker. This is Year One Surf Company. It is a one-of-a-kind piece of art made by Tyler Fromey. It's a 6'2". It is a Redwood surfboard with maple stringers, with abalone inlay. Very beautiful. The funds that we raise from this will all go to the Yosemite Climbing Association to power this organization as we take Facelift across the nation. Next year, we're going to be doing Facelift in Mexico, in Canada, with our friends from Arc'teryx and Squamish at the Arc'teryx Academy. Count on it. We're going to be taking it down to El Potrero Chico in February with Jack Worcester, our board member. Where's Jack? Is Jack in here? Jack Worcester, are you in here? Yeah, Jack. Wherever you are, Jack, we love you. Thanks for being a fine, upstanding, and outstanding board member. So we're going to try to shush one more time. It's that SH. 1, 2, 3. If you're talking in the back, stop. Thank you. Because we're going to do a little live auction right now. And all funds are going to go to the Yosemite Climbing Association. So let's get this thing started. This is a one-of-a-kind piece of art from the Year One Surf Company. Thank you to Jeff Fromey for making your son, Tyler, who then made this surfboard. It's generational after all. Okay, so let's just get the starting bidding right now. I think we got to start at $500. Do I see a $500 opening bid right now for this surfboard? Do we see 500? Anybody have 500 in their pockets to make this? Thank you so much, Jerry. Make some noise for Jerry right now. Jerry, yes. Okay, do we see, we're going to go in increments of 100 so we can get through this. Do we see a $600 bid? Do I see 600? I have 600 right here. Do I see 700? Do I see 700? We have 600. Do we see 7? We see 7 right here. Thank you so much. Can we bring the house lights up just a little bit more, perhaps? Thank you. And we have 700. Do we see 800? We have 700. Do we see 8? Thank you. Make some noise for 800. Yeah. All right, all funds going to the Yosemite Climbing Association. This one-of-a-kind surfboard will be yours if you could take it away. We have 800, is that correct? We have 800 going once. Do we see 900? Do we see 900? We have 800 going twice. Do we see 900? Do we see 900? Sold for 800. Oh, wait, we have 900 in the back. No, it was right there. I saw the hand go up. These lights in the eyes, but I see it right there for 900. Thank you so much. Do we see? We have 900. Do we see 1,000? Do we see 1,000? We have 1,000 right here. Thank you so much. We have 1,000 for this one-of-a-kind surfboard from Year One Surf Company. All funds going to the YCA. Thank you, Jeff Fromey, once again for making Tyler Fromey. We have 1,000 going once. Do we see 1,100? We have 1,100. Thank you so much. Do we see 1,200? Do we see 1,200? Thank you. Make some noise for 1,200 people. Come on. Yes. We've been auctioning off one of these boards every year, and this is the first time we've gone over 1,000. Make some noise for over 1,000, yes. Yes. We have 1,200. Do we see 1,300? We have 1,200 going once. Do we see 13? Do we see 13? 1,200 going twice. Do we see 13? Do we see 13? 13 right there. Well done, my friend. Okay, we have 13. Do we see 14? Do we see 14? Thank you so much. 14 going once. Do we see 14 twice? Do we see 15? 15. 14 going twice. 15. Sold for $1,400. Thank you so much. Well done, friend. Thank you. All right. Strong friend, can you do me a favor with this surfboard? We need to take it off the stage. Thank you very much. You are a delightful soul. Hey, could we have you come up here and help hand him the surfboard? Thanks so much, friend. You're going to walk over here, then you're going to hand it to him. You could jump down, and then he'll hand it down to you so we don't break it. I mean, not that it's breakable. It's indestructible, actually. To this over here, sir, if we could have you come on over here, and you'll hand it to him, and then you pick that up, and it works like this. Grab it, lift it, take it over there. Yeah. Oh, no, the whole thing. You take the whole thing with you, the stand and everything. This is it. All right. Whoa. It's okay. No, you got this. No, that way. Keep going. We've worked on this actual thing for a long time, and it was way worse before this. Thanks very much, friend. Yes. Well done. Your time in the sun. Conrad, I like this stand right here. It's very well done. Okay. Conrad Anker, he's been climbing for a very long time. He's been on the road forever. In fact, his first road trip was gestation. And he had such an itch to climb that he was born early. And he rappelled that umbilical cord wrapped down, cut himself loose, and he's been climbing ever since. He's been climbing so long, he was on the first ascent of Mount Sinai with Moses for the 10 Commandments. And in fact, when he got down, Conrad was like, Moses, so how'd it go? And Moses goes, Conrad, check it out. I got him from 15 down to 10, but sorry, adultery's still on there. But anyway, Conrad's been climbing all over the world, every continent. Soon he's going to go with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk for first ascents on Mars. Yes. Conrad, I've been hanging out for quite a while. We got a chance to go to the early 2000s and do some incredible work with the Alex Lowe Charitable Foundation and the Khumbu Climbing School. Conrad gets it. He cares. He gives. And he is acting on the wisdom that love and service are the best way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Conrad Anker. Yes. Woo. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah.
Yeah, Brady.
Introductions by Timmy. Always. There's always a little bit of roast in there, so we gotta like that. So, but before we get going on everything that's going to be happening there, this is a quick shout out to the first African American team that summited Mount Everest this May 16th. Yeah! Woo! So great to see representation, and 7 out of the 9 members made it to the summit, so it was a successful thing. And so representation matters, and a shout out to all my friends that made that possible. And so thank you everyone for coming out. It's a treat to be here in Yosemite Valley. Thank you, Ken, for your vision. And also thank you for the wonderful place this is, and with respect to the Awanichi and Miwok communities that are there. So this is Jim Bridwell and myself. In 2013, this is at the Uri Ice Festival. It's a gathering a lot like this where we're having a good time. And Jim's like a pretty important figure that's going to weave into this story about who we have this evening and why it's pretty a good thing. But we were talking yesterday, Timmy and I, that it would be great to have a Last Supper type of piece of artwork with Bridwell right there at the center, and then going out with all the disciples and all that. So we're going to leave that up to the historians to figure out who goes into the hotel art Last Supper in Yosemite. And Tom Frost here with Alex Honnold representing 2 generations and 2 different visions of how they climb and how they go do things. So, but backing things up, how did I get here and why am I here at this place today? And so that ties into the old Big Oak Flat Road, and that is off of Highway 120. And by good fortune, I was born into a family that settled that place way long ago. And so this is Marge and Joe. Marge's side of the family was from Scotland, Ireland. They started provisioning the gold miners. Joe, his side of the family, is from Ukiah. They were Danish. But Joe was a line person for Hetch Hetchy, Water and Power, and his idea of a good day off was to drive into Yosemite Valley and then tour over 120. Oh yeah, we have beer obstructing the view. So I'm not going to be throwing them out like t-shirt cannons. we get a line going. But Joe's best idea of a good time was to come into Yosemite Valley, and he would find the other gentlemen that were working construction. He would strike up a conversation, and Marge would be like, "We're here to look at the waterfalls, not to talk about work." So my dad, thinking, no, mountains are a great thing. You got to be stoic and everything. My mother there, she came over from East Germany. That's the top of my head, and their whole goal was to take us out. This is Mount Dana in 1972, and just lined up like kids getting sunburned and doing things. But this is how I got started. We would go out with mules in the Sierra Nevada, so we'd alternate between 108 and 120, going north to south each time, and it was pretty simple. We had PF flyers, our tin Sierra cups, a donkey with a baseball hat, and then I became a teenager. You can tell by the exposure there. I'm in the red flannel shirt, like I know everything. Mom and Dad just kind of leave me alone, but this is probably this was state-of-the-art climbing gear, blue jeans and waffle stompers, right? Retro is going to be coming back in. It's going to be people with the most gnarly type of things. But this was what summer vacation was, and so I really didn't know any better. And we had tarps because you could see the stars, but mosquitoes built toughness. It was all these crazy things. But the things I learned there at a young age, like what an afternoon storm, how to stay dry and things, really helped form who I was and what I came through on this wonderful journey. But as we go into this discussion this afternoon/evening, it's not going to go too late, but just sliding this down. The one thing that I always keep in mind is, why do we do this? When it's so great, but yet it takes life away. And we all somehow understand that value proposition. So as we go through this, what does it mean to you and why do we go do this? And it's the fact that it's so risky and dangerous is makes it special. So we all miss our friends that we've lost, but we all know that by living that life that they did, that they lived their life to the fullest. And we place a value in that, and which is a good thing. So, but on to Yosemite. Climbing it doesn't have a great history. It was born of colonial imperialism. Look at what happened in the Alps, all the other places. Mountains had a very close connection to spirituality. All the world's great religions have some relationship to mountains, but it wasn't necessarily this great thing. It was, think of the expeditions to the Himalayas and the expeditions to Kilimanjaro, and it was an extension of what society was doing 200 years ago. And then Yosemite happened, which this inflection point was really kind of neat because climbing was this old school and do it this way and have this sort of thing and not run in the mountains and have 20 essentials. And it was just hidebound by all the stuff. And then the 60s, and this guy show up, right? So there's this inflection point where climbing hits the 60s in the Bay Area. And that moment when they intersect, and it's outlined in the Real Rock film, the Masters of Stone, not Masters of Stone, Valley Uprising. So, and that tells that whole story, and that transition of when they were, what the 60s were and how they influenced the 70s, ended up going over to Europe and being the foundation of the free climbing and the Rotpunkt and that whole thing, and then kind of came back to us when with sport climbing, and then the use of bolts we see here on belay and what that means, and that whole different transition. And we are addressing that now currently as climbers, as we have more climbers here, and how do we manage ourselves on a resource that everyone wants to share, where our own expedition or own experience in the mountains doesn't impinge on other people's good things like that. So this was sort of what I set out to do, starting on El Cap. The first time was 1985, climbed the Shield in a hammock, and I dropped my spreader bar. It probably got picked up by one of your team in the last 20 years, but it kind of cascading down the mountain. But it was on places like this. This is Mescalito that I learned how to aid climb. And granite is the best rock. Are we in agreement with that? Yeah. Especially if you're in the big mountains, and more on that later. But being able to climb in this area was really key to me, and I had, thanks to one gentleman who really helped out and influenced, and this was Mug Stump. And so he was a football player from Pennsylvania, but got into climbing at a young age, and had a combination of roots in Alaska and in Patagonia on Fitzroy had sort of come onto the scene. Being 14 years older than I was, he took me under his wing, and we climbed El Cap and sort of took me on the path of what it could be like to be a climber. So practicing here in Yosemite, figuring the systems out, how to haul, what pitons to use, and things like that, and then taking those skills into the greater ranges. This is the Eye-Tooth and the Alaska range. So you have the wall climbing, but you don't have wonderful California weather. You have bad weather more of the time, and weather can be severe and bad here, but it's like this trade-off. And so Muggs was like, okay, we're going to go do these adventures. Jumar on a 9mm with no helmet. Things have changed. Yeah, fuck yeah. Wallowing up off-wits. And this was on the Eye-Tooth, and we tried it, and we got up to this rugby-style off-width climbing here in a total storm. Nice quick draw, right? But I don't think there's one springing tube chalk in there, one of Craig Lubin's probably early prototypes. But we ended up spending 8 days in a portaledge at the top of this pitch, and it wasn't any fun. We started rationing, counting days. But for Muggs, it was like this total bigger thing. Like everything was planned. We're meant to sit here and become impacted and listen to the Valdez oil spill on NPR, and that was what we did. It was like day 6, and we're like, man, the cams are melting out of the crack. Went out and checked, they weren't. But it was these sort of things where you go up and you try your best, and from the bottom of the peak, and that's kind of what alpinism is, and that we can focus on climbing for its pure difficulty, but that adventure component, that spirit lives in Yosemite. Yosemite is the crucible of it, and we have a responsibility to keep it alive and to nurture it. And it's like licorice or the Grateful Dead. It's not for everyone, but if it's your flavor, then you like it, right? So if you like off-wits, if you like Yosemite, if you like those like painful pin scars, everything else in there. But so my buddy Seth and I, we decided that we had to go get the 150 Classics climb that hadn't been climbed in 1990. So rather than go to the East Buttress of Middle Triple by flying an airplane in, we thought it would be sensible to ski in the 60 miles each way, which wasn't that, it was good. In hindsight, I recommend everyone, you should go ski 60 miles each way in the Alaska range. And it was, they had the rock station, you had your Sony Walkman, and it was a vacation a day in the month of May, and it would be like the rock jockeys would get on every morning and we'd be like, oh, this is great. And then one morning, while we were listening to the DJ talk about traffic and everything else, an earthquake hit Anchorage, and they were like, you could hear it on the radio, and all the sriracha around us came cascading off, and we were really fortunate in that nothing happened of it. But the Kichatnas, for those of you that are keeners in climbing, it's 3,000-foot granite walls there for your enjoyment. There's plenty of suffering involved. It's a little warm for Merrick, and I think if he goes to Costco, the food might be a little bit good. But I'm sure that, cold gravel, right? I mean, he just like worked that stuff down. But Seth and I skied in and out, and then finally made it back to Anchorage after our wonderful adventure. And it was another one of my buddies, our buddies, that is no longer with us, perished in a crevasse fall on Denali in 1990. But hey, that's the way climbing is, and we accept that going into it. So, question. Anyone here remember Bruce Pottinger in Kinaloa? Okay, one. Only one, and it's Ken. Two. Come on, Bruce. What about Ray Olson? What about these original? Yeah, Frog. That's all. But Bruce Pottinger, he had this one wonderful, he made chalk bags, and Kinaloa was the name of a street in San Diego. That was, he was one of the early beginning, and he had this t-shirt, this ain't no weenie roast. And Muggs had that like on the side of his panel van in Alaska. I'm like, dude, man, that's like ultimate sheriff bait. You drive through Moab, they're going to be like cavity searching you. You've got to like, you can't be riding that thing. You just like drive it through there. Anyways, it's up in Homer, Alaska, being overgrown, and it'll one of these days be up there with some sort of shrine or something like that. But Muggs got me excited on this idea, which we'll switch back to in a moment. But before then, Jay Smith, another local climber here. So now who knows of Jay Smith? Oh, yeah. And Jay was another great guy, along with Steve Gerberding, the Century Man, another El Cap aficionado. And so our goal was to climb the three towers in the Serratori Massif. So it took us 4 years and an expedition on each year. And then, of course, it got done in a season, and then it got done in a day. And so they've been downsized. But back in the 90s, we were kind of contenders because we did that. But we just didn't know any better. We're struggling on our way up there. But it was interesting to see that the skills that had sort of come to being here, like use the ascent of the North American Wall, which is a precursor to the Fun Hogs trip, and those gentlemen climbed Fitzroy, this peak in the background. Those very skills that we learned to climb here are then transported around the world in a variety of different places. And for any of you young, aspiring, hard people out there that want to cut your teeth on the most cutting edge thing, Timmy still wants to do that at age 53, but inside, if you go to the big mountains, climb granite. Look up geology maps. Yeah, woo! Don't climb sedimentary rock on Alpine routes. Go ski that stuff or go up it slowly and breathe deeply. But if you want technical climbing, it's got to be granite. And that's my one feedback of 40 years of doing this. Go climb granite. If you're going to climb granite in the bigger ranges, you've got to know your stuff by climbing here in Yosemite. That's why the Yosemite Climbing Association is so relevant. So Jay, he's like cut from the same cloth as Merrick, which is like, we suffer, we'll suffer more. Steve Gerberding, he was he's just tall guy that could get past anything and always good. So and it was it took us, got up high on the route using fixed rope, came down, let it sit for a year, and then eventually summited Torrey Egger, which was the midpoint in there. But yeah, it was good fun. So fascinating mountain range, one with steeped in history and controversy, whether or not people have made it to the top. And in the throes of climate change, a lot of the features that we were familiar with are not there anymore. And so the Exocet ice route, which was this wonderful vertical ice in this chimney that was fantastic, doesn't form up because it's too dry or it's too warm. So we're seeing the effects of this firsthand. And while we might not experience it in Yosemite, the crack on Hangdog Flyer is going to be the same in 5 years as it is today, unless an earthquake happens. But it's going to remain pretty constant. But the cryosphere, where there's ice in the next 5 years, is going to change fairly dramatically in that period of time. So more granite ranges. This is down to the Queen Maud land and climbing on these granite spires. This is what the dirty inside secret of being a pro climber. I was kicking out from the wall. We were posing. It's like everyone knows when you Jumar a rope, you're like, it's like walking on the sand where you don't break through. You want to be as gentle as, like bouncing on it. You can tell a rookie if you're like, you trying to saw that rope? I mean, you understand ropes do break. Old school, yeah, 9 mils, Prussics, let's go with it. But this trip with the late Alex Lowe was 96, 97, with Mike Graber and Rick Ridgway, John Krakauer, and Gordon Wilsey as photographer. And it was one of the highlights of our climbing journey together, Alex and I. Whoop, sorry, I'm just sliding these down so I can keep them in there. So came back some 20 years later in 2017 to go to this other area in here. So thanks to modern technology. Yeah, so this is like some major, yeah, this we're going to burn some carbon on this. This is a Soviet era Aleutian plane, so pretty badass. And so and they support science missions down there, and we decided to go climbing, connected up with the Ken Borick, the Bush pilots out of Alaska, and then landed us here in the base and hopped out of the plane. And so on this trip, we brought Alex along, who was like, well, this is cold, this is boring, it's not that hard. And so he and Cedar, yeah, of course, he's like, just pull down, it's easy. He and Cedar, their whole thing was they climbed like all the routes, like all the peaks, 15. And Jimmy and I did one peak. So, of course, he was like, you guys are old and slow. But I'm like, dude, your routes are low angle and fluffy. And he'd be like, so, of course, we're like, go back and forth. And, with Alex, you've always got to be, he's always like, well, just grab the hold and like bring it down to your knee. Why can't you do that? Like, well, I don't have strength or technique. And so I'm always come back with something to keep them in there. But this same sort of style of climbing, on granite, and so the skills that were formulated in Yosemite and then taken around the world. And while there is granite in other ranges, say in Chamonix, the Chamonix granite's not wall climbing. It's 70, 80 degrees, and so technique, you're on your feet, and you can do things quickly, but there's nothing like these endurance journeys up the Captain. So wasn't it, Pete, didn't you do one with Plaid, and who else? The three of you? And Jerry, 25 days? You're all here. How many days were you on the wall? 24 days. Yeah. So we need to recognize in this group of like how awesome that is. So let's give it up for these three gentlemen. Yeah! And Pastor Petons is here in the audience. We love Pete. And if anyone needs some training on how to rack and organize your pitons, classes every day at the bridge. I always try to come up and like ask him before he recognizes me. So, aren't you supposed to like get your stuff together before you get to Yosemite? I do the same thing. You got to lay it out in the tarp and just sort of bask in its glory and think about those old pictures from Glendenny of like the picnic table and like, yeah, there we are. We're doing it. So, but again, kind of coming back to this, and a lot of the technique we're using here was aid climbing. It was pretty cold, but now the progression in modern alpine climbing, we saw it start here on El Capitan with the free ascent of the Salothe, the nose, and now 8+ routes that are free routes on the Captain, and now taking that sort of technique to the Great Trango Tower, the Karakoram, places like that, where the climbers are pushing out and trying to go as hard as they can on technical difficulty. And so this was Jimmy and I. This was on our route. It was pretty wide most of the way up there, and we saw the crack, but it was just wide. So this was another one of these classic cracks where I refer to them as the Tourette syndrome's inducing cracks. You're up there and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, I didn't think I had this in me. But it doesn't get you up the climb any easier or faster, but it does feel good, right? You're like, misery. So unless you're an expert like Pamela Shanty-Pack or Brazilian climber girl, and you just like, I'm not there. I suffer. Off-woods, they beat me up. So, but this was a pretty cold and miserable type of place. But interesting granite formations that never had the physical caressing that glaciers have done. So they're uplifted and then freeze-thaw cycle faster than what the glaciers erode them and pull the rock off of them. So that you don't get the beautiful rock that you get up in Tuolumne or you have down here. But it is beautiful. And it doesn't, but this was on Old Vitana and a route that Jimmy and I opened up, and we were psyched. We didn't place any bolts or any pitons, even though we had said equipment, but we just wanted to lasso these sort of cornflakes and everything like that. So here's a little picture of Jimmy on the summit.
Yeah, Jimmy, where are we? We are on the summit of Olvatana, and it's about negative 30 degrees out. This thing is epic.
Yep.
I mean, okay, that's not even the right word. I don't even know what to say. Look at this place. This is amazing.
That's authentic wind sound. That wasn't done in post. Of course, Jimmy's, we love Jimmy for the beautiful free solo film and what that has done for El Cap climbing and for all of us. And Mike Gautier, who's boomeranging back, soon to be here, and his wonderful friends and everything that's been a part of that. And it was something that all of us as a community can celebrate. And I still just thinking about third-classing free rider makes my hands sweat. And I'll put this out there, the greatest physical athletic feat of all time. Anyone want to debate that with me? Okay. I knew it was going to be easy right here. It's like, kids, it's Halloween candy, we got it, But if you think about it, you can run the fastest thing or you can do the most precise gymnastic movement, which involves both of those techniques are in climbing, but neither of those have like the ultimate consequence, which is doing El Cap without a rope. So we got to be respect. It still freaks me out on that. So the next journey is when we come back to Meru and on that and this life quest of what we wanted to do and more of this type of climbing. And so the nice thing about Merrick's slideshow, whoever came with Merrick last night, you really enjoy that slide. He's out doing a nail up today. Respect. Yeah, respect. But from whenever we go now, we're traveling light compared to Merrick. We saw his rack, right? When you like quad number 7s and I mean like fleets of beaks, I got to have that on there. But this is like my happy place. I like a type of climb that you got to pitch a portal edge. If you're shoveling out for a snow platform, it's not quite steep enough. So this was K7. We failed. More often than not, we fail. A couple sneak pictures of mugs. But anyways, on to India, and they're in the central part of the Himalayas. It's a relatively new mountain range, a result of the Indian subcontinent pushing northward into the Eurasian landmass at about the speed our fingernails grow. And most of that is the shallow marine sea that was below it. But within that, there's 18 granitic anomalies in the Gangotri to the Nepal Himalaya. The Karakoram is its own sub-range, which is entirely granite. a really lightweight granite. But so we came here to the Garwal, and this is sort of the east meets west. And the holy dude that he lives in his cave and chills. That's yeah, they're Shivites, and they know how to bake. I mean, they invented 420 in a respectful way. I mean, it's all in there. They're like, they're down with it. That's their holy sacrament. So it's been known to happen in Yosemite. But anyways, this was sort of this dream climb. Muggs had tried it in 1988. That was my same year we were in the Kashmir, Kishtwar Himalayas. Got hit by a storm, came out, and he never was able to finish it. He perished in a crevasse fall in 1992. 2003, first chance with Doug Chabot and Bruce Miller. No success. We tried to do it lightweight with like a single rack and 2 ropes, and they were just going to punch it. And we get up there, it's an overhanging wall. And we're like, okay, we're going to sit in our slings while we do this stuff. Probably not the case. Came back 2008, and our goal was to do it Alpine style within fixing 3 or 4 ropes between our camps. And we started out, and we get all the way up the first day, and then we get a 4-day storm. And so we just sit and we fester, and then the weather clears, and we go up. And so it gets colder, it still storms, and we just kind of are up there for a real long time. And eventually come down, our tents are flattened. We didn't have a shovel, so I learned quite a bit, kind of came back, and that was our goal, was to revisit it. But it was with Renan and Jimmy and myself, and a kind of a good team. And what this climb meant for me was the culmination of all I had put into my life of climbing. Is it had the skills that we learn by camping around in Alaska, wall climbing skills, traveling in Himalayas. But then 2011, we're going there for our 3rd time. Renan tumbles and has a ski accident, and this is the clicker, and has to visit the hospital. And that, of course, we don't like to visit the hospitals, but this is 5 months before we're set to go, and it's like pretty major. And so we have this come to Jesus meeting. We're down in Victor, Idaho. My wife, Jenny, Jimmy, and myself. And Jenny's like, my rule of thumb with my husband is when he's going on these big expeditions, he's got to have a team of 3. So if something goes wrong with one person, you have 2 people to help rescue that person. And so that's been a good safety margin that I've enjoyed going in the mountains with, and it's more comfort for my family when I'm at home. And so we were like, yeah, and of course we had Ivo, the Bulgarian wheelbarrow artist, in the wings, right? So Ivo was ready. But we were like, Jimmy was like, no, we're going to stick with Renan, and that brotherhood and that sense of like, we're going to do it, and was able to convince Jenny. And so, but I was always like, Ivo, that could have been you. And he's like, oh yeah, man. So we love Ivo. So whoever's on WhatsApp with Evo, we let them know we had a shout out and respect for Evo. So you gotta love these characters and these histories of. Where did you learn English? Oh, in Yosemite jail. How did you get around the United States? Oh, on the bus. What type of work did you do? Anything that didn't require papers. So. But then he went back to Bulgaria and he orchestrated the sale of 510 to Adidas, and he's still being Evo. So the long-lived Evo. But when we got here to the Gangotri, one of the things that I try to be mindful of is that mountains mean different things to other people. And in our seminar yesterday, Cam, one of the rangers, his point was that any one person's recreational pursuit is not worth any more than another person. So it's a great way of looking at why it doesn't make sense to chip holds, why you wouldn't want to do this. And for more than just recreation, mountains are spiritual places for many people, for many different reasons, and we're not one to judge or see them. So we asked the holy man. He was the oldest and the most ranking sadhu that was there in Gangotri. So we came up and we're like, hey, we want to go climb Meru. It's a spiritual peak. It's next to Shivling. Is it okay? And he was like, oh man, this is like, it's already happened before. This was meant to be here. Your goal is to go up there, bring me back a piece of rock. And so they were kind of like rooting for us, and like it had happened. Like we were there. So I took that as a good sign. But again, no matter where you are, before you climb, you got to break out the tarp and sort your gear. And so next product extension is going to be YCA gear sorting tarps. You just imagine like Twister. So instead of like all the dots, it'd be like pitons, rope, water bottles. Yeah, stick clip. Yeah, there we go. You can wrap it up into a burrito, chest on the other side, sun top. YCA gear racking tarp approved by Pass the Pitons Pete. No one thought we'd do product innovation up here. But the fun thing about this peak Meru was that it had all the ingredients of what I define as fun. So 70, 80 degrees ice, alpine climbing, similar, and then overhanging wall climbing. With the exception that they were kind of in the wrong sequence. The snow was at the bottom, and the alpine stuff was in the middle, and then that steep head wall was the overhang bit, and then there was more ice to the summit. The steep overhanging wall, in deference to the roots in Yosemite, was the Indian Ocean wall. So, because we were in India. That made any sense. But this is kind of like portaledge life. You sit there, you fester, you have a good time. We went in 2008. We had the brilliant idea of like, we're going to take a two-person ledge with like summer weight sleeping bags. It would be like puppies, and we'll just be warm. We froze our asses off. We had knees and ribs, and nothing was happening, and we were just like totally miserable. So we're like, okay, we're going to do something else. I go back to Montana. My friend's a mechanic and a sewer, and we decide we're going to make a three-person ledge by just kind of expanding the ends of a two-person ledge. And yeah, great idea, but oh shit, exactly. The best things go awry. But we were, that's always in the sort of like what you want to have planning in there. But while we were up there, like on the second or third day, we tacoed the portaledge on the wall side. So it was like, oh shoot. And this was one thing to like, you come back from a failed expedition, it was like, oh, the weather was really bad, and everything flooded, and no one got along. We had bad food, and there were lightning bolts, and all these. The excuse station is just like 75 cars long, and everyone is like this great excuse. But when you roll in, and you're like, why didn't you make it up there? Well, it's because the piece of shit gear I made in my garage broke. And they're like, dude, that's a case of beer, not just one, but 3 cases of beer. So I was like, how am I going to live this up? So this little clip, of course, when you're on a wall, and there were previous attempts, it all repelled off. So every piece of gear we saw, we would strafe and add it to our rack. So when we were coming down, we had more gear, and that was kind of what was going on. But a little side humor.
Broken. We're Himalayan big wall climbing, and we broke our portaledge.
But we found a lucky soft iron piton. We're
Gonna try to fix it?
Yeah, it'll work.
Okay. We're at like 20,000 feet with a broken portaledge. It's cool. We don't have any place to sleep.
Give me an ice screw, Jimmy.
Yeah, so on the fly maintenance. So there was you could identify those soft iron pitons. Those things are so. Pete, do you take one of those on El Cap, a soft iron 1 or 2?
No, actually, but I was going to point out, you used to own a portaledge making company?
Yeah, this was my own portaledge. Yeah. So, yeah, I know. So, but it was we were out there pushing the envelope of what we can do by making a 3-person ledge. But this was Fester Fest 2000, so everything's in there. You just, but unlike like Merrick, we decided that we're just going to have one type of food. So the third time up there, Jimmy's like, "You're in charge of food." And I'm like, "Okay, great." He's got cameras. I'm like, food, pitons, ropes, haul bag. So I go to the food co-op, and I'm like, "Oh, instant food, zero preparation couscous." And I fill up the bags. Little did I know it was kind of nutritionally bereft. And all it really was is a way to deliver olive oil.
Oh, that looks great. This is more for ledge life footage. Just had to film what we're eating right now. Okay, let's take a look here. Conrad wants us to eat yesterday's leftovers. It's been sitting on a piece of snow all day.
Frozen.
Frozen. That makes total sense, right?
Yeah, well, I'm going to grate some cheese. I've got some cheese here. Mix it in with this. And then we're going to get boiling water in there. We're going to add that. And we're already starting to build up a surplus in couscous.
Okay, wait, but a little bit more here. Can you describe our stunning, diverse menu for dinners?
Oh, we have one choice on the menu, and it's couscous. So, and breakfast is oatmeal with blueberries. And so but it's simplicity.
There's what? What's the menu again?
Oatmeal for breakfast and couscous for dinner, and then our snacks in between. So,
Right.
and tonight it's going to be frozen.
So tomorrow, what are we having for dinner?
Couscous.
And the next day?
Couscous.
What did we have for dinner 4 days ago?
Couscous.
Sweet. What do you think of that, Rod?
Well, sometimes we skip the couscous, but last night there were leftovers.
Couscous.
Yeah. The funny part was I was somewhere or the other, and this young guy comes up to me. He's just like all stoked, full of energy. I'm like, why? He's going to tell me something. And he's like, "Brother, man, I did the whole Pacific Crest Trail on nothing but couscous. You're my inspiration." I'm like, he probably have some liver condition afterwards. His mother writes me this note: "Junior's dying. What did you do to him?" But we're just trying to be efficient up there. But anyways, so this was, I should have stayed at age 49, I did this. And then I thought, at age 55, I'm going to still kind of keep after it, and got my ass handed to me on another peak. But that's a different story. But this was, for the three of us, it was a lifetime goal. And to be 14 years older than Jimmy, and to be in the same way that Muggs had been my mentor, to be his mentor, and then Renan being younger than Jimmy, the three of us sticking to it. Our goal to stay together as a team and to climb together as a team was pretty good, and that is meaningful. And a lot of respect to Renan and Jimmy. This is after we got back to terra firma, but for making the film Meru, because it would have been an essay in the Alpine Journal and sort of classic butt shots with the humble brag. It really wasn't that bad, but we endured. That's the Alpine Journal, right? The art of the humble brag. But they made a movie out of it, which I would never have been able to do. And so I'm thankful for them, and I appreciate that along those lines. And so what we do, we climb granite. Where do we learn to climb granite? We learn to climb it in Yosemite. Where is the most badass granite? Here in Yosemite, right? Woo! Yeah! So, and without my friends and family that are all part of this. The boys on top of Half Dome. Here they are being little junior environmentalists. And they're growing up. But now they're more suave and better looking and taller. But anyways, thank you all for coming out here. Timmy, for inviting me here to be part of Facelift. Ken Yeager and the whole team. Woo!
Give it up for Conrad Anker. Conrad Anker.
Yeah.
So I have some questions for you, Conrad. So, interestingly, you start your show tonight by purposefully mentioning an all African-American team climbing Mount Everest. And it seems like you're doing this on purpose so you can change the narrative, right? So you can invite others into the experience. And that the only way we could change this sort of colonialistic or narrow paternalistic thing is, as Lauren Delaney Miller was doing as well, as telling these other stories. Why was it that you brought Phil and the boys and their Ascent?
Yeah, well, the reason we climb together is the manner in which we interact with other humans is unique and special. So we climbed yesterday. Your life was in my hands and vice versa, and we worked together to have a shared goal, which is the intrinsic reward of being on the mountain. That fundamental manner in which we interact with other humans is a paradigm shift and one that society and our planet needs. And so climbing just happens to be this wonderful vehicle that is doing that. So the more people that we can bring into climbing to share this connection, this support, this international language of belay, the happier we are. And it's, for me, that so many of the team sports that we introduce our children to are confrontational, they're antagonistic, they're hierarchical, and they just kind of beat the weird kids down, the bullies kind of move up, and the weird kids turn into climbers. So we want all the weird kids to be in our family. So there's the reason. And yeah, Philip is a wonderful guy. We've been friends for 20 years. He's a Knowles instructor, and there's, check out Black Ice is another film that we did, so.
And I had to check, go ahead.
You don't get anywhere by starting with that first step.
Right. And with Phil, I remember being at the Kumbu Climbing School and working with him, and that was like in the early 2000s. And last night with Gisele, we talked about the loss of loved ones, our friends, through climbing, and we mentioned that, you know, you could die twice. Once when you physically die, and a second time when you're no longer mentioned or remembered. So in your show, you mentioned Muggs and Seth and Alex Lowe, and I'm curious if you could tell us about the importance of the Alex Lowe Charitable Foundation and the work that they do in not only remembering Alex, but pushing forth with those ideals and his points of view that he lived life with.
Yeah, so thanks, Timmy. And so the 90s, I was in my 30s, and when you're in your 30s, you're at the best of your game for that type of climbing. And Alex was my main partner. We did all sorts of expeditions, and we rolled the dice as frequently as possible and with great gusto. But things caught up, and Alex perished in an avalanche. And after that, Jenny and I created a family and raised the boys, and part of that. And one of the ways to remember Alex was to give something back to the people that he was influenced by. And so our first project was with the Altai Climbing Club out of Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. So Steve's been there climbing. You probably checked out some of, yeah, the Bosch is still there. So we were like, let's go teach climbing. And we went to Mongolia, had a good time. Next one was a vocational training program for high altitude workers in Nepal, understanding that high altitude climbing isn't going to go anywhere, and the safer it is for the people to be part of it, the safer it is the people that work in it, and the more fun that you have. And that the foundation of that is that if you learn something because it's fun, you're going to be better at it than if you're going to be like, Timmy, if you don't learn your alphabet multiplication now, you're going to get the, right? Now think of math like if you eat all your Cheerios, you'll have like more math capabilities. I don't know. What next question?
Next question.
Right, positivity pays. There we go.
We talked about, you know, you may not be able to determine how you're going to die, but you can work really hard to determine how it is you're going to live. And, you shared that great aphorism there at the end, like the be good, be kind, be happy, be curious. A new one, right?
Yeah, add to it.
So I'm curious with your decades of unconventional living, like of choosing that, not only the path less traveled, but the one that you actually have to rough hew, out of the forest in front of you. What is one of your biggest takeaways for us in living this life and looking to live our best lives?
Surround yourself with positive people that are full of energy, so we connect still year after year. And try things that challenge you. I mean, don't go way out of your comfort zone. Like, I'm not going to go third class free blast. No.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it would be bad. And Brandon in Search and Rescue would be like, okay, tomato cleanup. So, we get a joke about it, right? But
Gallows
challenge
humor.
yourself, yeah. Challenge yourself.
And I'm curious about that like in the film there, the couscous thing, and then meeting the individual who like spent the entire Pacific Crest Trail only eating couscous, and then his mom getting in touch with you and like.
But that was just joking.
But playing on that
Yeah.
with like being an influencer, but then also being a bad influencer, right? Yeah. And so I'm wondering, are there instances genuinely where people have been like, dude, you live this life. I tried to live this life. It didn't work out for me.
Someone was like, man, you and Dano partied a lot in the 90s. I didn't want to be like, oh, no, that might have been a negative influence. But no, we're all human. We all have faults. And so we try to live the best we can and live to your own good standards. And then for you and I, we have a little extra burden because we're public people and we can't be.
And that was
crazy things.
my next question, actually, is yesterday, Conrad and I went and climbed the Royal Arches. We did it in just a couple of pitches and passed everybody in high fives all along the way and made our way up to the summit and then went over to the top of Washington's Column and just were absolutely floored by the beauty. But then Conrad's like, hey, I've got to do a public lands announcement. And here, grab my phone and we're going to do suddenly recording Conrad as I'm like doing take after take. He's like, Conrad here and remember to celebrate our public lands.
Which is tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you got to get it ready, dude, right?
Yeah.
You got to prep the machine. But it's interesting because you've created a platform, right? You have 500,000 followers on Instagram. You've been somebody just referred to you as Yoda to me recently. And so but using that platform as a force of positivity, like coming here to celebrate the Yosemite Climbing Association and the work of Ken Yeager, and I'm wondering why it is that you do that, why it is that you use this platform to do good, and what are you hoping to get in return from it?
Well, as a cis white male, the world has been handed to me on a silver platter. I have nothing. My family's from out here. I was introduced by climbing by my dad at age 14. So there's nothing, any problem I have is basically like a developed nation type of problem. It's not like there. So rather than being someone like myself and my age that would be elected into office to hoard more and to get more of that power and to keep that systemic system of class division entrenched, my idea is to just break it up and like move it out and hold those people accountable for things that are less than climber worthy.
Yes. Well, thank you, Conrad. We love you, Conrad Anchor. Thank you for your good work. Thanks for being good, for being kind, for being happy, and for remaining curious.
There we go. And on the side of the building, I'm engraving after the show.
Okay, so anything you want engraved, that's an inanimate object, not your body. That happens late hours with a tattoo gun.
Yeah.
But you're actually engraving, like, anything.
You buy one of these nice...
Oh, one of the little,
yes.
clean canteen cups. Or like your watch face or something like that. But whatever it is, I'm going to get something.
Fun.
I'm going to get something engraved. All right, well, give it up for Conrad Anchor right now.
Jimmy!
Thank you, Conrad. Love you. Thanks for being here. Okay, so we have been doing this event with the wonderful Ken Yeager for the last 19 years. And next year, we celebrate 20 years of this thing. And to celebrate that, we are taking Facelift on the road. This year alone, we're doing 12 other locations. We're going to be heading to Joshua Tree on October 22nd. We head to the New River Gorge on the 29th. We're going to be going to the Red River Gorge. We're heading to Red Rocks. So check out YosemiteClimbing.org. Check out Facelift this year, next year, every year. We love you. Tomorrow, huge music, huge props to all the volunteers. Have a great night. See ya. Okay, wait, Ken Yeager just said, hold on. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., we've got food. Thank you to Alex and Weston and Chelsea from Yosemite Hospitality. Don't forget, stack the chairs and move them to the sides. Stack them and rack them, people.